Hi guys, welcome to an interview with an ex-client of mine, Alex Yates. Alex has kindly agreed to jump in and talk with us about his journey. We were just talking about this before jumping in, actually, when Alex finished up coaching me, and we think it was maybe sort of 12, 18 months ago. So this is a really good time to check in and just see about some of the progress that you've made, some of the sort of the challenges, the journey that you've had since finishing up coaching on the program on Reignite Pro. So firstly, Alex, thank you, man, for spending a bit of time with us and jumping in to chat.
Yeah, no worries. Morning. Hope everyone's all right.
So I guess to start off with, maybe just a little bit of background into who you are, a bit about family, sort of job, etc. Just sort of anything to set the scene, really, that's going to help.
Oh, blimey, where do you start? I suppose we crossed paths, didn't we? Must have been about originally 4 years ago, something like that, I would think. So yeah, getting on 4 years ago. In my late 40s, I've got 2 young kids, got a long-term partner. Just kind of reached a little stage in my life where I think originally a lot of people frame that as a midlife crisis, but the more I've come to understand, and the work that you and I sort of have done, and where my sort of mindset has ended up taking me, there is no crisis involved with that. So I just embarked on this little journey of self-development. I wasn't happy where I was. You and I met, we started talking, started actively putting things in place. And yeah, sort of 4 years down the line, I feel in a fantastic place. Every day's a school day, and just keep pushing forward. So that's kind of how our intro was originally.
And I guess if you cast, I mean, it was probably going on 4 years, to say, like, cast your mind back to use the term like midlife crisis, but and it's not. But what was going on that made you think, look, something's not right here? I need to get some help with whatever this is. What was it that was like actually forcing you to look at yourself and say, like, I need to change something here?
I just didn't feel well physically. I was carrying a lot of excess baggage. The days where I felt unwell seemed to outweigh the days where I felt fine. So I think it was that turning point. And there's no there's nothing quite like, when you've got children and a partner, and you've got a lot of people that rely on you to be that performer, to be that provider, and do a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think that was the kind of turning point for me. I've had a few tough times throughout my life and things, and not that that's kind of affected too much, but it distorted my priorities. So getting back on track and achieving that recognition that actually, I need to be this. I need to start going down this route. And thankfully it's kind of turned itself around, which was awesome. It was great. I've loved the process, which I think helps too. There's been some grueling days and things, because you do end up having to sort of really dig deep into those dark recesses of your brain space, to try and get some of this stuff done and trying to implement this kind of stuff. So that's the path I've kind of taken, and I'm kind of grateful that I reached that point when I did. But you only yourself can make those changes. You can't, you can be told by people around you. You can be, people can hint at stuff and things like that. But until you're ready to do it, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So
I often say this, right? Like the decision is the hardest part, making the decision to change. And people quite often do it from one or two places, right? It feels like they'll do it from a place of where they get to so much pain that they're really unhappy with things. And that's where most people decide to change. It's like, I need to change because I'm unhappy and this can't continue. Or the other choice is to actually define where you want to get to, create like a vision that you're so emotionally attached to that there's no other way than it kind of pulls you towards it, emotionally, mentally, etc. It's like for you, like we could see, I've followed some of your posts since we finished coaching. And, when we first started working together, I think maybe like a 5K was probably a little bit difficult, right? And then by the end of the time we finished coaching, you were doing 50Ks, but now you run fairly consistently. Like, just tell us a little bit about like what happened there, like what's changed in that kind of physical space for you.
So yeah, so I mean, obviously the health and the fitness kind of improved. I started running maybe, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, was it? I would think, probably. And yeah, like you say, 2 years ago, running 1K, I couldn't run 1K. I couldn't, I'd struggle. I couldn't run for a bus. It was, and there was a huge physical aspect of that and a mental aspect. But then progressively, things did improve, and then you were fundamental in helping me achieve the capacity in every department to run 50K last year. So that was, and that was goal orientated. It was okay, let's set a goal, let's work towards that, let's implement everything we need to do. So yeah, so last year sort of I kind of ticked off a 50K. And it was great. It was, loved it. I kept going, and then I kept running, kept training for a little while. It kind of put me off doing the big distance for a little while. I'm not saying I fell out of love with it, but I just felt I've kind of done that for now. Mm-hmm. Then I had to reassess and I've realized that in the process of learning for that, setting the goals, working towards things actually was part of the biggest benefits. So then I introduced another goal, and that was so now in the back of my mind, it feels like what feels normal is doing ultra, at least one ultra, if not more, every year. So I did another one this year. So I worked up to that. But then in the process of training for that, a mate of mine just on a very casual phone call said, "Do you fancy doing an ultra down on the South Coast?" And it's like, yeah, why not? Why, what could possibly go wrong? But having that as the goal was fantastic because, I just became, and I tell you, I don't want it to sound arrogant, but you start eating 21K, half marathons and 30 and 35K runs on a Sunday morning, just for fun. But there was that didn't seem like hard work at all. Because you'd do it, you'd live for that feeling afterwards. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some pretty fierce days running up on the plane. It was, high temperatures, ridiculous times of the day, and just because it had to fit in, it had to work, and that's, I was running 4 times a week, gymming once or twice a week. It kind of consumed me at times, but I realized that, and I made space and allowances for everything else, for work and home life, kids, partner, and all of that, and kind of struck a really nice balance. So I just kept going. So, and then that culminated this year got to, sort of end of March, April time. I did a 65K Jurassic Coast Ultra along the coast path in Dorset, which was absolutely savage. Probably the hardest, without a doubt, the hardest thing I've ever done, but did it, and there were multiple times where I can't do this. I'm bailing. Next checkpoint, I'm out. I'm tapping out. This is just too, physically and mentally, it was too hard. But then I realized and then I had to quick smart sort of, you have to reframe things, don't you? And think, well, if I bail, I've got unfinished business and I'm going to have to come back, and I'm not going to have to endure this 30K that I've just endured again, which was only halfway through. And I thought, no, why can I not do this? Why am I telling myself I can't do this? Let's just go to, and exactly like you and I, and how you've kind of helped me come to that understanding that shrink that change, make it into manageable pieces. And I've only got to get to the next checkpoint. That's all. Get to the next checkpoint, have a sandwich, have a drink, then see how you feel. Get to the next one. And thankfully I made it, got to the end. And then we went for a pint and thought, great, what next? So from that point on the running, so it just became the norm. I love looking forward to some of those runs.
It's a huge accomplishment, right? To be able to get to that point from where you were 3-4 years ago, and to actually be able to reframe things, physical capacity, and just say, well, I'm just going to get to the next lamppost. Or, one of my favorites, I was chatting to a client yesterday about it, actually outside of just a physical sort of capacity, but you can sort of, it starts there where it's like, I'm going to do this. I know that I'm going to complete it. So it's just a case of just managing my time expectations until it happens. There's no other reason than this gets done. I think that mindset of like, I'm not going to fail. I'm always going to succeed. It's just how and when I succeed. That can apply to other areas of your life. And I think, your performance, when we started coaching, we started looking at things outside of just the kind of the physical stuff. We started looking at broader performance goals, relationships, started looking at business, etc. What happened there in some of those other areas of your life after you'd embedded certain mindset principles from a physical capacity, and then you started broadening out and looking at these other areas? What happened when we were coaching together, and sort of more importantly, what's happened since?
So I mean, on a work principle and relationship principle, everything has got, like fitness alongside it all, everything's improved, because it's kind of helped me, the goal setting, the structuring, the scheduling, the awareness of things around me have become more important. So, I'm not going to say we all make mistakes, but every day is not completely smooth. From a business perspective, it seems to have grown exponentially, and there's a lot coming in. We're getting bombarded because I've kind of been really proactive in dealing with people in a slightly different way. Whereas before it was just, I suppose it was just kind of, I was happy with just doing the bare minimum, what I kind of needed to do, whether, I mean, that was probably interrelated with where I was in myself at the time, possibly. So yeah, work perspective, it's busy. It's, I've cultivated some really good working relationships. Things have improved. And I think as well, the kind of buzz you get from feeling better. And when I say that in a kind of physical sense, because there was a stage where I just didn't feel, there were times when I felt ill because of the place I was at. And it was just like, well, actually, but when you feel better, when you feel well, that kind of then permeates, doesn't it? And people start to think, well, actually, I suppose you sort of end up surrounding yourself with those kind of people that help kind of build you up as well. And it just sort of goes from strength to strength. So that's, and the kids are great at the moment. They've got their trials and tribulations. They're coming into teenage years. they've got lots of stuff going on in their worlds, trying to, developmental stuff. And it's nice to be, I feel confident that I'm in a good place to help support and kind of model the right sort of things and behaviors and that kind of stuff. Whereas before, it's like, a few 4 or 5 years ago, I definitely felt I was in no place to kind of dictate what you should do, what you shouldn't eat, what you shouldn't, how you should act, and all of that, because it's like, look at the template I was sort of portraying then. It was like, well, that's, how can you take someone seriously that's not taking themselves seriously? So and that is completely, that's completely sort of turned around. It feels like it. So, and I get feedback now. I get feedback from my partner. I get feedback, I get feedback from the kids. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, but I think we all go through that. But yeah, so it's been a good process. It's been a very enriching kind of process, really. So
I like this, concentrating on yourself first, like going internally, developing yourself and putting in place the structures, the boundaries, the systems that you need to then go out into the world, right? We talk about the evolution of tribe, right? So first of all, working on yourself as like a solo person, right? From a physical, mental, emotional perspective. So sometimes you can go into sort of spiritual, which is just talking about sort of the energy, right, rather than anything else, but focusing on you first. Then it's expanding to your family unit and showing up as like the role model, then going out into further afield, going out into work and actually showing up as the leader within that sort of tribe, and then possibly beyond that, right? But it seems like the work that you've done on yourself, you've able to then project higher standards into, the work that you do, demanding more of like relationships that you kind of nurture and cultivate, and maybe just stretching yourself a little bit more. It's like, what happens if why couldn't I put, an extra X amount on that? Why couldn't I just push a little bit harder? What's kind of come up, on the flip side, like what have been some of the challenges that you faced into, like since we've finished coaching, right? What have been some of the challenges that you faced into over the last year, and how have you dealt with them? Like, how have you showed up? What have you kind of put into practice to kind of deal with them?
Cool, blimey. Well, I suppose it's your kind of capacity to process stuff, whether it's on a physical level, mental level, emotional level, whatever kind of thing. I do find myself falling back to some of the basic principles of, things. If some things aren't going quite right or to plan on whatever level it may be, I straight away, I look at some of the basic principles. Am I drinking enough? Am I sleeping enough? Am I resting enough? In the early days, it was all out, hammer it every day, like, and you'd recovery, what rest, why, no, you've got to get on, you've got to sort of push on. But that's the intensity, I suppose, that my character brought to that. And when you go through that sort of automated little checklist of, I'm not processing, so something, you've got a big project coming up, you've got loads of work on, you're not and it's like, actually, now I know I'm not processing things correctly, or I'm not reading scenarios correctly, and sometimes it might just be something simple. I just haven't, I've been rinsing it, burning the candle at both ends, doing office work late at night, getting up early, and that's not conducive to all of the bits of the puzzle fitting into place. So you start straight away. But on the other hand, it's the majority of the time now, it's become more intuitive. I go to bed. That's, I'm going to bed at that time. I'm going to get up at that time. And all of these kind of little principles sort of work. You concentrate on hydration, eating well, the right nutrition, what am I doing this week? Am I doing loads of runs, or am I going to the gym? What am I eating? Because the impact that all of these kind of things have that are all interwoven in terms of your performance on every level can stem from your hydration, your nutrition, your sleep, and all of that. And if you know that those are in place, then everything else seems to work. If you're eating well and sleeping well, then your cognitive function of dealing with dramas, big projects, emotional children, partner, whatever it might be, something going bang on the vehicle, or your brakes going, or something, you can adapt to that, whatever it may be, even quicker when everything's in place. And it actually, and it sounds like a lot. I mean, if you were to pluck me straight out of where I was 5 years ago, and put me into one of these kind of scenarios now that I have to face on a work level or emotional level with the children, things like that, it would be overwhelming. It would be, oh my God, you'd be like a rabbit in headlights. I don't know how to do this. But it's just been sort of progressive change, stacking small little habits, continuously, consistently, and all of that becomes normal. That's if I think back and I think, blimey, you kind of like I think we've talked about it in the past during coaching periods and things like that, where it's like you look at where you've come from to where you are now, and be and accept and sort of really happy with the change. But then you've also got that excitement for, well, if I can change that much and implement those changes in that period of time, just think what I can do in that period of time. You've still got time ahead of you. So, it's reverberated across every kind of level. So all of those little things and sometimes I don't actually realize I'm doing it until maybe a day or two after, because sometimes you don't always process what you do. You just react.
Mm-hmm.
You react, and then you think about it. You sort of you reflect. You have periods of reflection, and you think, and it's like, that's how I got out of that, and then you realize what you implemented to get out of whatever it may have been. So it's a lot of it feels like it's not a conscious thought process sometimes now. It's kind of, it feels embedded, and that's how it kind of works.
I like that. It sounds like it's we talk about behavior change, like running new software in the mind and pre-programming the neurons to fire in new ways to create new neural circuitry. It's like, actually, like the system that you're falling back on is kind of what we talked about, right? It's like the Kaizen approach, where if you were to take the version of you 4 years ago and the version of you now and say, right, you just have to do everything that this new version of you does. And that's going to be hard, because he's a very different person. He has different energy levels, he has different expectations, he has different morning routines, he has a different capacity for exercise, he's learned new skills, right? So if you were to say go from A to B, that becomes very difficult to do. But actually, when you start to layer in these things gradually over time, and it's just an iterative improvement, right? Just 2 to 3 things that I'm focusing on this week or this period, then it's like I'm going to layer in something else. It's like that version of you now that I'm talking to, he's a hugely different version than the person I would have talked to 4 years ago. But it's because you've layered in things, right, during the time that we were coaching, and then probably layered in some new stuff right afterwards, and then that is kind of what you've got to fall back on, that automatic system that's defining who you are. I don't know, does that resonate at all?
Yeah, no, I think it does, definitely. I think firing up different neural pathways to achieve what you want to achieve at any given time. I think if you consistently fire those pathways, that becomes the shortcut to get to where you want to get to. But it's you know, and as long as you maintain patience and don't be too hard on yourself, because we all sometimes, I think people fall back on stuff that they're used to. They fall back on old habits because it's a comfortable place to be. They know what they're dealing with. There's not too much change. But I think with those little changes gradually over time, and also becoming more aware of how you feel on multiple levels. I mean, you could go out, if you went out and did a half marathon this afternoon and it's hot and you haven't run for God knows how long, that's going to be painful. And then tomorrow you're going to think, I don't want to run again for a long time, for a while. It kind of puts you off. But, go and rattle out a little 1K, 2K, 3K in the heat, hydrate, sleep well, rest. And tomorrow you'll think, oh, I really like that. I'm going to do another one. And just sort of stack it up that way. And the same for, on sort of on an emotional level, on a mental level. You fire these little pathways, and then before you know it, it's like, well, actually that seems like the only way. Be open to other ways of trying things, but you learn how and without sort of teaching you or anyone to suck eggs, it's like you learn by doing things. But I think a lot of people don't have patience. So it's, you kind of want results. I want to lose weight. I'm going on holiday in 2 weeks' time, but you've done nothing up until now. And you think, and then you get to go on holiday and you maybe feel like a bit of a bag of shit because, you're in your budgie smugglers and it's like, so why are you so hard on yourself? Because, you're hard on yourself for not having the results, because you haven't put the work in, kind of thing.
This is it. The weight didn't come on overnight, right? The weight comes on gradually. It's just you get to a point where you talked about pain and pleasure earlier, where just the weight come on, and it's like, oh, it's not that bad. And it gets to the point, it's like, it could be better. And then it gets to the point where it's like, shit, I need to do something about this. Yeah. And that's the point where it's like, that's taken months and months, if not years in some cases. And then people want to say, okay, I've got a holiday in 2, 6, 10 weeks time. Like, I want to lose it. And the quicker you kind of lose it, the quicker in some cases it comes back on, because you're only looking at that very surface level variable, instead of, you've talked about doing the kind of the development work behind it and asking yourself some of the harder questions, like, why do I want to lose the weight? Like, why did I allow myself to get in this situation in the first place? Who do I want to show up as with my kids? What sort of behaviors do I want them to emulate? So I'm curious, like, for you moving forwards, like, how's the sort of vision for your life changed, over the last sort of year? Like, what sort of elements of your life have perhaps sort of altered, or how are things sort of different for you in terms of like the goals that you're setting moving forwards?
I feel content. I feel content, but I'm kind of not complacent. I'm not thinking, well, I've done all this work. I've reached a point where I'm good. I can run that. I can lift that. I can eat that. I can, relationships good. Kids are good. It's like, I still look. I still sort of scan the horizon for those next little things. I still, I've still got unfinished business in respect of where are my limits. It's I kind of I look at things, I look at targets, I look at goals, and I think, well, yes, I've done that. I've run an ultra last year. I ran an ultra this year. I know I'm going to run an ultra next year. Might even be this year. Might even be the end of this year. I mean, that'd be a whole can of worms if I try and squeeze another one in this year. But how things have kind of changed for my future I mean, you never quite know what's around the corner, but I feel as though I've kind of set myself up for success, or better, improved success in a lot of aspects. So I look at things and I look at goals and I think, well, I wouldn't mind that, I've kind of shifted focus at the moment, because obviously I ran a big run earlier on this year, but everything else, I had to put quite a few other things on hold, so lifting weights, exercising, gym work, and that kind of stuff. That all kind of went by the wayside. I did it. I went through the process of it, but it was a shielded attempt in respect of, I need to preserve my my running fitness. So I can't afford to have an impingement, a tweak, or put my back out or hurt something. I didn't want to risk all of that effort in training for a big run by doing something silly in the gym. So all I focused on was what serves my goal right now. That's strength and conditioning and, and stretching, all of that. So that was all part that, and I just sort of wove that into the whole fabric of what I was doing at the time. Whereas now, running, I'm taking a bit of a back seat on the running. I occasionally do the runs, but that's not my ultimate focus. So now it's like my focus has switched to more strength work, more sort of, more gym sessions, more home sessions, more aerobic fitness, build and all of that. So that to set me up for better success later on, and then if something suddenly crops up last minute, it's thinking, well, I'm feeling pretty good. Then I probably will be in the territory of just plucking something ridiculous out of the hat and thinking, well, you haven't actually planned or prepped or, there will be training involved, and that's how it is. But that's what it's given me. It's given me this kind of forward thinking, scanning for the next thing. What is the next thing, and whatever it may be, it seems to be, I've got a what I feel is a comfortable feeling for me that, well, where's my limit? But I think that's part of my character. I've got an intensity that brings this, or rather over the last couple of years, what's come out of my character is this intensity of thinking, what can I, I'm not saying it's the all or nothing mentality. Sometimes it is. And that gets involved. And it's like, so I go to the gym and it's like, right, I'm gonna lift to failure. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna increase this, increase that, get to the point where I cannot lift anything. And that's fine at times, but it's the same for the running. It's, you take it to a kind of an extreme almost.
There's a difference, isn't there, between the sort of finding your limits and trying to, I guess, improve your work capacity, and this, right, I'm going to go everything into this, and then fuck it, I'm just going to leave it for X amount of time, and that kind of all or nothing seems different from what you're talking about there, which is just trying to push the boundaries on what you think is possible.
And because you create it, you don't create it, you achieve this belief that, by implementing this sort of these smaller changes, you kind of, you lift a bit, you add a bit more weight, a bit, this kind of progressive stage, but you get strong in the process of that, because there's a time frame involved as well. It's not just, you don't just suddenly appear in the gym and just lift weights. And we'll all do that, and you'll find a limit. And the same for running, or the same for, with your relationships or work and things like that. I mean, sometimes you need the all or nothing mentality. If you've got a big work project, or you've got a lot of work on, you've got to focus on that at that particular time. but there's always a time frame involved. You don't have a deadline. You can work up to the deadline, and then the job gets done, and then you can, then you've got more time. You've got, so it's kind of that, but then that falls straight back to what we talked about, the structuring, the scheduling, which doesn't overwhelm anymore. I don't reach that overwhelm place and think, and just sort of shy away from stuff. It's like, yeah, let's do that. That's a critical thing in my time frame. I need to work towards that. Let's get that done, and then we can then, still keep a few other plates spinning for a few other things on whatever capacity it might be. But yeah, you just kind of work through it, really.
And I like that, because your work capacity is improved, and your ability to sort what I call the outer game, which is, your scheduling. What are you not doing? What are you prioritizing your energy and focus into? You talked about balance. It's like sometimes it's going to be into specific health or challenge related goals. Other times it's like, well, I've got a couple of contracts to do. I need to really sort of channel that more into business and just keep the foundations ticking along from maybe an exercise perspective. But because your work capacity is improved, you can kind of choose as and when you're kind of the wheel of life we talk about, how you kind of spend that energy. And because I say work capacity is improved, you've got more energy to spend, so you can get more done in less time and free up, time to spend with kids or partner, or, do something else. Or you can just, get more done in the gym, get more done in an exercise session, get more done at work, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just conscious of time. I know you've got like another engagement to go to, but from your perspective, who and at what point would benefit from coaching and looking at their sort of performance holistically? We talked about like health and fitness, but sort of just broader than that, looking at themselves, looking at some of their development areas. At what point do you think someone needs to just say, look, actually I need help with this, and who in your opinion is it best suited for?
What, for coaching?
Yeah.
Well, that's really tough, because obviously everyone's different. Because you've got that spectrum of people, because it is kind of, everything's on a spectrum, isn't it? And it's like, well, I'm sure you got those people at one end that no, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to do. And they embark on their own little campaign of, I suppose, self-development, self-coaching, trying to find things out. You've got right down at the far end that people are just absolutely probably shit scared of making that change. They're just not quite ready. So I suppose it's each individual. I mean, everybody could do with coaching. It's finding the right coach and the right person to help you take those steps. At my stage, I struck it lucky. I came across you from, I think, was it I think I saw you on Facebook, friend of a friend or something. There was some connection there, and I luckily I was at that point. I thought, do you know what? Actually, yeah, this is, let's kind of embark on this. So it's a real tough one to sort of say. I mean, everybody would benefit from coaching, but not everybody's ready for coaching. Really,
I like that. Yeah, I like that analogy. Actually, it's if we bookend it, the people that's like on their own journey over here, and the people that like just aren't ready. We talked at the beginning, right? The biggest thing being the decision to make change. It's like, for whatever reason, just not in a place where you can decide. Like that kind of middle portion of people, just whether it's actually decide that you go and do your own thing, right? But it's like decide, or it's like decide that you want to make a change, but you need help doing it. I like that analogy.
Yeah, and I think it's. But again, it's the model that you sort of send out there, isn't it? It's that kind of, people see that change. Sometimes people are kind of, well, I could never do that. People might look at what somebody's doing but it's, you don't kind of want to compare yourself to other people. It's kind of, look at your values, look at how you feel, look at, you know, and I think if you start asking yourself, if everybody started asking questions of themselves and looking internally, I think, you know, there'd probably be a lot of people who think, actually, yeah, I do want to, this is what I want. This is what I'd like to achieve. This is kind of what I'd like to go. But not everybody's open to that. You know, some people are just kind of happy doing what they're doing. And it's, yeah. But I think, you know, if everybody had access to some form of coaching, I think maybe there'd be a lot more happier people out there. Maybe, who knows?
Set the world to rights.
Yeah.
All right, look, Alex, thank you very much for coming in and talking about your journey. I think, you know, just to hear where you've gone over the last year, 18 months, hugely powerful. You know, health and fitness, obviously making some huge strides there, but also business is booming and you're still freeing up time to spend with the people that are most important to you. So look, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for coming in and sort of speaking to everyone here. And look, guys, if you've got any questions for Alex per se, you know, you want to find out a little bit more about his journey, just either leave a comment below or just send me a DM, and you know, we can kind of arrange a sort of short chat. But look, thank you, and God bless. Take care.
Yeah, thanks, mate. All right.